you're not moving anywhere. You thought you found a friend to take you out.
All right, so welcome. Thanks for joining tonight. So this is another episode of Talking Hobies, and tonight we're going to do part 2 of fitting out and setting up a brand new Hobie 16. So if you're joining on Facebook or joining on YouTube, welcome. You can type your comments in the comment field, and I'll see those and try and respond to those as we go. So this is kind of interactive, so ask questions, comment, participate. We'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts, and we'll try and address your questions as we go. So my name is Rich. I'm the president of the International Hobie Class Association, and this is another series of video webinars sponsored by the International Hobie Class. We're a group of volunteers that organize Hobie sailing events really around the world. And for those of you that are members, we thank you for your support. If you're not a member, we would very much encourage you to join and become part of the wider Hobie sailing community. You can learn more about us on hobieclass.com. So let's move on. So we did a part 1 video on setting up a brand new Hobie 16. You can find that on YouTube or on Facebook. If you want to watch the past one, that was really about setting up the platform. And part 2 is more aligned to the boom, the mast, and the sails. So there's a fair bit of, this was a bit of a project, took some time. So I shot a bunch of video as we went, and we're going to share some of that video now, and we'll talk about it as we go and answer your questions. So let's jump right in. We'll share some of the video here and talk as we go. Oh, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. This is part 1. Optional system to install in the mast, but very common for folks that are racing the boat because it makes it much easier. Back up a little, just a tiny bit here. You already installed it on the other side. Hopefully it's good to go. Okay, so we're going to set up the mast next, and we're going to install the jib halyard system. This is an optional system to install in the mast, but very common for folks that are racing the boat because it makes it much easier to adjust the jib halyard system. So here's the mast we have at the bottom. You can see there's 3 cleats right now. There's the cleat and the track, which is the standard downhauls cleat, and this one on the side is one on the front. And there's none on the other side over here. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to install the adjustable jib halyard system, which is going on the side. And the very first thing we're gonna do is remove this cleat on the front of the mast and relocate it to the side. So in theory, you could actually leave this there, but what I find in practice is leaving it there, it's just something that for the jib seat to catch on. So we need one on the side anyway, so we're gonna take it off and we're gonna move it. Okay, so we've drilled our holes. We removed our cleat from the front. We have 2 holes here. We're actually going to plug those holes here in a minute, and we're going to install the new cleat over here. So whenever you're drilling into the mast here, you need to be sure you make a watertight connection when you reattach the fitting. So what rivets use these little rivet caps. They go in first, tap them in very gently, and then the rivet goes in after that, fits in the hole and pulls. I also use a little dab of silicone right here underneath the fitting, just to be doubly sure I have a watertight connection. These front holes, there won't be a fitting here. I'm just going to plug those with an aluminum rivet just to make sure they're watertight. Okay, so a word on rivets and when we're installing rivets on Hobie Cat boats. So all these parts are under very high load, and what you need here is a stainless steel Monel rivet like this.
Okay, this is not something you're gonna find at your local hardware store or your local Home Depot or whatever big box stores near you. These are specialty rivets. They're designed for very high load applications. The easiest place to source these, frankly, is your Hobie Cat dealer. They come in different lengths. You need the right one for the right size. They're very tough customers to pull. And as you're gonna see here in a second, the standard rivet gun you get at the hardware store isn't gonna do it. You need a large, powerful rivet gun to pull these properly. Now, with this horn cleat here, you notice it's recessed a little bit and the head of the rivet gun won't fit all the way down there to make a tight connection with the head of the rivet. So one trick to do here is you take a couple nuts, you slide those down there on top of that, and that will let the head of the rivet gun make proper connection to pull the rivet. So to complete the jib halyard system now, we need to install a couple more parts. So one is the cheek block. The cheek block has to go on the side of the mast, like so, and then next is the cam cleat, which goes in line. So the jib halyard will go down to the original cheek block on the boat. It'll go up to this one. It'll go down through this, and then it'll tie on the horn cleat. So kind of is going to go roughly like this, but where exactly you're going to put this? So in the class rules, you want to look this up. There are very specific measurements in the class rules about where these parts go on your mast. So those have been just designed for proper engineering and what works well. So refer to that, measure it, and get it in the right place to start with. Okay, so there we have it. The job is done here. The jib halyard system is installed. It's got a cleat on each side, so the line will feed down off the top of the mast around the original cheek block, up to the new cheek block, through the cam cleat, and tie on the horn cleat. One thing to point out here is whenever I install stainless steel part, particularly like a threaded screw, into an aluminum part, it's an opportunity for corrosion. Okay, so you mix in salt water and dissimilar metals that don't like each other, you get galvanic corrosion occurs, which can in the long term lead to problems. So I'll always coat the parts, which didn't show with Lanacoat, which is a anti-corrosion product to help mitigate that over the long term. I've also removed the horn cleat here that was in the track, the original downhaul cleat, and have now installed this little plate. So this is the plate that is specified in the class rules. It comes with the kit for installing your downhaul blocks too. Those are already pre-installed on the boom, and the lower downhaul block pins right to this pin right here. A couple little things we're gonna do to finish out the mast here. Now that we have the fittings on, is we're gonna install some labels here. These are trim labels. They're measured scales, one for the front and one on each side for the downhaul. And this just gives us reproducibility in our settings. So from day to day, if we like a particular setting, it's easy to take note of it and reproduce it in our time.
All right, so that's kind of mast setup and boom. Just real quick, so the boom there wasn't really any talking with that, but what I like to do with the boom is I put my stickers on there. So I put my core stickers on there. There's stickers that are sold for like the common flag stickers you see in racing that you just cut them to fit and stick them on there, and it makes a very nice, easy reference on the water. So when you see a flag, you can look it up. You see a course, you can look it up. Also in there, we fitted the 3-to-1 outhaul system, which is class legal on the Hobie 16 boom, and the adjustable jib halyard system, which is what that last segment was all about. So those are really optional items. They're commonly sold as what's called part of the power pack. You can buy it all as a kit. You can source the parts individually, whatever your preference is. You can do the downhaul only. You can do the outhaul, whatever you like, really. But these are optional parts that are common for racing, and it really make it just a lot easier to make adjustments on your boat and adjust for the trim as you're sailing. So So yeah, so we have a few folks online, so please go ahead and send your questions or comments as you go, and we'll try and get back to them. So the next segment really dives kind of deep into battens and sails and how we fit those out. And we're also going to circle back a little bit here and talk a little bit about something I alluded to in the previous episode called the Global Hobie 16. And what does that mean? So we'll circle back to that here in a few minutes, but that's really an effort by the manufacturer to sort of standardize Hobie 16 production around the world. And what does that really mean? So let's dive into battens next. So here we go. Okay, so battens and tuning them and fitting them to your sail needs some special attention. So you can see in this jib here, I've fitted a stock batten as it comes right from the company. You can see it sticks out pretty far from the sail. Now, from the company's point of view, they don't want to sell a batten that's too short. And some sails are older and some are newer. And of course, some older sails can be more stretched. So you need to have a batten that really is fitted to your individual sail. So the company just can't sell you one batten that fits. There's no one size fits all. Everybody needs to custom fit their batten to their sail. Now, what you can do to eliminate the hang up. So we all know that the Hobie 16 jib will hang up, the battens will hang up on the jib halyard. And one way to minimize that problem is to trim your batten. So I'm going to show here one now. We pull this one out and we compare it to one that I've trimmed already. We can see here the one I've trimmed is just a little bit shorter. Okay, so when I stick it in the sail, it's going to be long enough to tension it, but it's going to be much tighter to the leech of the sail, and that's going to minimize the amount of snag that the batten has on the jib halyard. It just helps alleviate that. It won't eliminate the problem, but it helps alleviate the problem. Now the other thing with battens, there's two things that you'll also see. When the batten comes right from the manufacturer, you can see here's one that it's a brand new batten, pretty squared off at the tip here, right? So one thing I'll do is I'll actually take the batten and I'll just hit it with a little sandpaper right on the tip here and round it off and take off any sharp edges. Maybe not necessary, maybe a little bit overkill, but it just seems like a good thing to do. Sharp edges on a batten in a sail seem like not a great idea, so I'll just clean that up a little bit. What some folks will do as well is they'll tune their batten or they'll sand their batten to improve the shape. And this is totally optional and totally up to the user to decide what they like. So here's two top battens for a jib. So here's a stock batten. It's completely untrimmed and unsanded. You can see it's fairly stiff. And here's one that I've been using that now is been trimmed and sanded. You can see much more shape in the batten. So no one size fits all solution here, but up to you to decide. I like to tune the battens and trim the battens to the sail and put just a little bit more shape in them. Okay, so just a little bit about jib battens to start with. So, the jib is sort of its own special animal on the Hobie 16, that it has a full batten jib where, the other boats don't. And typically in the world of sailing, most boats don't have full batten jibs. But the jib is fairly, it overlaps the mast at a fairly significant amount. So that's a common hang up, right? And a lot of newer sailors complain about that, where they struggle with that, is why their jib gets caught on the mast. And it really, as we say in the world of computer science, it's a feature and not a bug. So it's just it's how it is. You have to deal. It's how the boat was designed. You have to deal with it. But how you mitigate it is you shorten those battens as much as you can to fit them in there so they don't hang up on that jib halyard system, regardless of what jib halyard system you have. Now, I should mention here that there is another jib out there that is class legal and is available and is very popular in Europe. And it's sold under the name of what's called the race jib. And you can find it in the Hobie Cat catalog or from your dealer. And essentially it's, rather than the jib sticking out with a tie where you have a little batten string and you tie it in, it uses a Velcro enclosure and a little push pin, and you push it in, and then you seal it with Velcro, and it stops. The entire batten is contained inside the sailcloth. It's a little tricky to use until you get used to it, but it actually works really well. It's really common in like I said, in Europe. Now, why is it less common in North America and Australia? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. It's a more expensive. If you look at the price point, that's probably, maybe that's the answer. It's a more expensive jib to buy than the stock sale, and maybe that's just the point. But yeah, it's out there. It's an option. I've used it. It works really nicely. So a couple questions here come in just on jibs before we move on. So which battens do you trim and taper in the jib? So I cut all of them for length to make them, make them fit and not extend outside of the jib longer than is necessary. Okay, so I want to be able to tension them and have enough batten protruding that I get proper tension, but I don't want any extra battens sticking out. So I'll trim them all. Now, is which battens do I sand and which battens do I taper? Again, this is personal preference. You're going to guess 10 different sailors, you get 10 different opinions. But what I do is I sand the top 2. Those are the shortest ones, they're the stiffest ones, and it seems like those are the ones that need that extra shape, where the lower 2 are long enough that they get good shape on their own without having to sand them. And Herb asked, do you have different battens for different wind conditions? And yes, I do. And it's still a little tricky about really knowing that, and whether it really makes, at the end of the day, does it make a difference? So I have some, I sometimes switch them, sometimes I don't, but I don't know. In my experience, just having the shape in there versus having a really flat jib that's untuned is what I'm looking for. And then after that, yeah, does it make a difference on a really windy day versus a light wind day? I'm not sure. All right, so let's move on. So next we're gonna look into the joys of how you do this. And so I'm gonna show you how I do this. It's a little bit of some photos here. We'll try and walk through this a little bit. It's a pretty unpleasant process here of sanding a batten. So it's messy, it's nasty. You're dealing with the fiberglass dust, which is not pleasant to get on you or breathe. So you need to wear a respirator and proper PPE. I have this very nice sander, which connects right to a vacuum, to a shop vac, and it does a really impressive job of managing the dust. Although I do this outside, and you can see here I just lay things out on a piece of wood so to make it easier to manage this, because it really makes a mess if you try and do it in the garage or anywhere indoors. And I do some measurements here before I start, and I put some pencil marks on there to give me some reference points as I'm sanding. So let's continue on and watch a little more video here.
Okay, so we fitted the rudders on the boat.
All right, so that was it for battens real quick. So yeah, so lay them out. I'm sanding them, I'm fitting them, I'm testing them as I go, and trying to get what I think is a good looking shape in each batten before I proceed. Now, this is a little bit of a trial by doing process. There's no cookbook recipe for thou shalt do it just like this. You have to kind of just try it and go as you do it as you want, but you definitely can overdo it. So don't do that. If you overdo it, you got to start over again. So don't do that. But sand it, see how it goes, try it, see if you like it. So of Chris asks really about where you thin it. So there's a lot of stuff online you can read about sails and sail design, which are not just catamarans, but all sailboats, about what is really the right shape and where the max draft is. So you can find some information on measuring that. There was something published. I was trying to find it and I couldn't quite find it. I thought it might have been in the hotline years ago, but I couldn't quite find it, whether you lay a sail out that was raised up a mast that was laid over and you measure. So it's kind of what we do is you put it in the sail, you measure the length of the batten, you measure the shape, and you look for how long it is and where your maximum draft is. And you can calculate that, just with a tape measure and a pocket calculator and figure that out, and where you think you want the max draft to be. But like I said, don't overdo it. Go slow, give it a try, see how you like it. All right, so moving on. So the next little segment is on rudders. So there's only a short segment here on rudders. So the next bit really was on the rudders. And what do we do with the rudders? So, on a brand new boat that comes stocked with the EPO3 rudders, everything is fitted, everything is pre-assembled by the manufacturer before you get it. There's not a whole lot to do, but put it on and align it, which is what I'm going to show in the next segment. However, what I find that I like to do is really take the boat sailing the first time and see how it feels before I make any adjustments, because it's really pretty good right out of the box. There's sometimes a little bit of tuning required based on what your preferences are, but not any big changes. Like, years ago, we would, it was common to have to re-drill things or to trim the trailing edges or to sand off imperfections on the leading and trailing edge. And with the EPO2 and the EPO3, you don't have to do any of that anymore. These rudders are just, absolutely, manufactured at a higher standard, and, they just work right out of the box with impressive steering. So anyway, so let's just look real quick here how we did the measuring. I'm just aligning the rudders and tuning them side to side.
We're checking the toe in and the rudder rake. We do this measuring with a tape measure. What we do is we put a little pencil mark right down on the rudder. We go 10 inches down, we put a pencil mark. It gives us an even reference point on both sides. And we're measuring the distance from the front side to side and the back side to side. And we're looking to see if we have about 3/16 of an inch toe in. Very good.
All right, so that's sort of the quick bit on rudders. So I took the boat out the other week, after I finished it. I sailed it once already, and what did I find? So what I found was sort of what I have expected in the past when I've gotten newer boats is, it's really good right out of the box. However, there's sometimes just a tiny bit of weather helm. And, some folks like a little more weather helm than others. I like a little more neutral feel. So, maybe personal preference, but yeah, that was the only thing I found was just a tiny bit of weather helm. Did a little bit of adjustment on that. Took it sailing the next day. Felt like it was better. I'm going to take it sailing again this weekend, and just kind of feel like it's a little bit of a process here of multiple sailing days until I get that rudder toe in, just in rudder field, just the way I like it. But yeah, very good out of the box. Not much to do. Everything works really nicely with the rudders. And really, that's frankly one of the benefits of a new boat, and this new rudder systems are really just so nice right out of the box. All right, so just a little summary now, and then we'll see how we go here.
So the boat's rigged up now. We're ready to take it for a sail. You can see here the halyard system and the downhaul system attached. 6-to-1 downhaul. Into the boom here, we have a 3-to-1 outhaul system. A couple of lines that need to be trimmed a little bit. We'll do those after we rig the first time. These lines are a little bit long as well. We're going to trim and adjust these a little bit. After we sail it, we're going to see how the rudders feel, and then we'll make any adjustments we need to do there for the rake.
All right, so that's kind of where we wrapped up. So just just an overview of the boat, the setup, how you saw the downhaul system hooked up, and the outhaul system. The other thing that I alluded to there too, I like to, take it sailing first, see how everything feels, and make final adjustments. So I'm going to also look for lines, any lines that are a little tiny bit too long. If they're a little bit too long, I'm just going to trim those. And sometimes it's just a couple inches, but I'd like to just clean that up. And maybe that's just me, but I like to just clean that up. And you don't want to over trim something, but you want to get it, just so. So, all right. So weather helmet and how you feel. We had a couple questions here. So a couple interesting things. So you can adjust your weather helmet with your toe in a little bit. And some people, I like to use about 3/16 of an inch. I don't know if that's really a magic number. I've seen other people use a little bit less or a little bit more, but you can actually, if you're out on the water and you don't have the right helm, one thing you can do, with the Hobie 20, the Hobie 20 style, tiller connector, right, where you can just, unclip it with unclip the bungee and turn it. Just a half a turn, one way or the other, can actually make a significant difference in how it feels. So you can try that out on the water. If something doesn't feel right, just, stop when you're warming up and give it a half a turn, one way or the other, and see how it feels. And it's amazing how much that little turn can actually make a difference. And then how do you adjust for weather helm? So Herb asked about that. So, what I do is I put the rudders on. I make sure they lock down. I make sure everything's set right. I'm going to loosen the set bolt. I'm going to make sure everything pushes all the way forward and everything's right. And then, and I take that there's a little hex screw at the bottom, right? So there's a little screw at the bottom that uses an Allen wrench that is there to adjust the rudder rake, right? And how much the helm is. So what I always do, I back that screw completely off. I don't use that screw at all. So that's step one. I take that screw all the way, back it off completely, and get it out of the way. Now, the next step you find with the EPO 3 is it has that rubber bumper pad on the front of the rudder. So the EPO 2 and all the previous ones didn't have that. But the rubber bumper pad really does a nice job of protecting your rudder blade from the impact with the rudder casting, the lower casting. What I actually do if I need to trim it a little bit, and what I did with this one, I take a razor blade and I just trim that a little tiny bit. You'll see that it's a little bit oversized. There's a little bit of kind of corners hanging off, and it also compacts a little bit after the first or second sail. I'll just take a razor blade and I'll just trim that very slightly to see if I can get just that teeny bit more of the rudder tucked in and improve the helm. Now, if I can't get it, what I did with the last boat I had, I just couldn't quite get it right. And I borrowed a trick I copied from Blair Wallace. Is I took that little bumper off completely, and I replaced the whole rudder shim system with a different shim system that wrapped the rudder blade inside the casting. Probably something it's a little hard to describe, but maybe I can show you real quick. Okay, benefit of being in the kitchen here tonight is you can get to the kitchen stuff. So one trick I found from Blair is, you shim your rudders, and the rudders come really nicely pre-shimmed from the company. I didn't find I had to shim this one at all. Had a lot of nice shims in there, had a really nice tight fit. But it's common, particularly with the older rudders, you have to shim them. So you don't want that rudder wobbling in the casting, right? You want that nice tight fit. You don't want anything kind of wobbling in there, right? Because that messes up your feel and how the boat steers. So it was common. They sell shim kits you can get from your dealer, but people would also make their own. And what Blair found and what I copied is you take one of these gizmos. So what is this? This is one of these little plastic sheets you use with the cutting board for cutting raw meat, right? So really thin plastic material. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's just the perfect thickness to make a rudder shim. And with a really sharp pair of scissors, you can cut this, you can fit it right in there, and it works beautifully. to make a rudder shim. So what I did with the previous boat is I actually bent it, cut it to the shape of the lower rudder casting, fit it right in there, and it wrapped the rudder blade perfectly, and replaced that bumper because the rudder would sit against this. There wouldn't be any impact against the casting, and it worked beautifully. So maybe try and get a picture of that in the future. If not, check out Blair's boat. He's got one that just works perfectly like that. So. All right, so that's sort of the setup of the boat and what I do. So, my focus in setting up the boat is a couple things. I definitely install, the jib halyard system. I think that is a huge benefit. It just makes it so easier to adjust and sail the boat. Other than that, my boat is relatively stock, and that's on purpose because I want it to be relatively consistent with a boat I'm going to get when I go to the World Championships, or if I go somewhere else and I charter a boat, like I go out to California and I charter a boat from someone, for example. You don't want anything that's radically different. You want to stay within the class rules and be consistent with what you're going to get on another boat. And then the other kind of main big theme I have in boat setup and boat maintenance is avoiding breakdowns. So I want it to be bulletproof. I don't want to have to, have a disaster and a bunch of drama out on the water because something broke and failed. I mean, that's going to happen on its own, just over the course of time, but you just want to minimize that because it's just drama you don't need. So we try and we do that. And when we go through our maintenance cycles, we're looking at anything we think is going to break. It's got to go. I mean, there's no point. You think about the cost of going to compete. And when you travel anywhere, just fill in your gas tank to go somewhere to sail. And are you going to really risk having a disaster because you didn't replace that $5 part, that was worn out? And you saw it was worn out 2 weeks ago, and you looked at it, and you're like, oh yeah, that needs to be replaced, but you didn't do it, right? So it's like, don't even do that. Just get rid of that $5 part and replace it. So it just makes your life better and you have less drama. So, and ultimately have more fun with your sailing. All right. So yeah, Chris says Karen loves it when I steal the kitchen gadget. So yeah, that's great. It works good, doesn't it? All right. All right. So Herb talks about what might break. So yeah, so it's kind of crazy, right? So it's almost anything might break. So what might break? I mean, even things you don't think are going to break. So like, let's think about like rudder gudgeons and the screws that hold those things on. The amount of load on your rudder and the connection to the rudder and the rudder system to the back of the boat is way higher than you think it would be. And, those are pretty beefy screws and they can shear right off and break. And, if your rudder rips off to the back of the boat, right, that's pretty much a disaster for anybody. So you don't want to do that. But you check those things. The shroud anchor pins, you look at those also, right? I mean, big, serious pieces of stainless steel, yet over years they metal fatigue and they can break. So you just again, when your mast falls down, it's not good. Nobody has fun like that. So so you look for things that are going to break and take care of them and just try to prevent them from breaking. So if you see a line that's worn out, you see your rudder cams are worn out, they're not locking right, they're not working right. I mean, rudder cams, we know they're plastic parts. They're not designed to last forever. They're gonna wear out. It's just part of the deal. You gotta maintain them. You gotta replace them. So other things. I mean, what do you guys find that breaks? I mean, those are things I look at. I just try to go through everything and think what's gonna break here and to replace it. So I pay a lot of attention to things that are really gonna like ruin my day. That, for example, anything that's holding up the mast. Right? I mean, all those things are metal fatigue and all those wires, all those fittings, the mast falls down, that pretty much ruins your day. So you don't want to have that. All right. Yep. Loose belting, Herb said, trapeze lines, all those things, right? So just check all those things and look at that. And yeah, Chris says spares. So this is a good one too. So, years ago, I mean, this happened to me. I was I forget where I was, but I was somewhere and something was broken and it kind of messed up my day. And I'm thinking, gee, I got one of these at home and I didn't bring it with me. And how stupid is that, right? So if you've got spare parts, put them in your box, bring them with you within reason, right? Some things you aren't reasonable to bring, but you gotta have it. You gotta bring it with you because it just can salvage your day. It's like having a spare tire, right? It's like, who's going to go driving anywhere without having a spare tire, on your car or your trailer? Because if you get a flat tire, guess what? You're SOL, right? So you got to have a way to fix that. So anyway, so I think David just joined. Hello, David. All right. So other thoughts. That's sort of my thoughts on boat setup, boat maintenance, and none of this is none of this is scripture. None of this is thou shalt do. This is Rich's opinion on. Oh, it's Steve. Hi, Steve. None of this. All this is my thoughts on how you set up a boat and how you enjoy your boat and how you prevent having trauma and breakdowns and get enjoyment out of your boat. So. But like I said, none of this is thou shalt do. A lot of this is personal preference. So, all right. Hello, Ken. All right. So thinking back to the past episode, hopefully you guys got a chance to look at that. Any thoughts, comments you have there? And how we do that. Like I said, I'm really looking at, getting it set up properly, getting everything tight, getting it properly installed. Not really deviating anywhere from anything that, like I said, I'm following what is sort of within the class rules and what is typical that you'll find at a world championships or a major event. So. All right, Herb asked about telltales. So the sails, when you get your sails, typically come with telltales. Hobie sails do. Some other classes, they don't. They just give you telltales in a little package, and you got to put them on where you want. But yeah, so the telltales, the Hobie sail right from the manufacturer comes with a bunch of telltales on it that are nicely placed and work well. Although I do find that they fray fairly quickly, and they get like lots of little loose threads on them. So I'll go and take a pair of scissors and just trim those loose threads off. And then I'm always every year or so buying new ones and replacing them pretty frequently. The only ones I add leech telltales. So I do put some leech telltales on the main of the jib just to look at the flow off the back of the leech. Otherwise I use the ones that come from the manufacturer. Yeah, so Rodrigo, question about sail tuning live. Yeah, that would be interesting. We might be able to try doing that. A rigging one where we're rigging the boat, looking at it while we're sailing the boat. Yeah, let me think about that. We'll try and do that somewhere in the future if we can do that and get a nice internet connection. I've been shooting some video lately with a GoPro, exploring different GoPro positions on the boat and shooting some video and looking at that. So I actually did one the other week, and it was kind of funny. I had it on the bridle right above the mast hang, and a wave hit the camera and kind of knocked it, so it was supposed to be pointing straight back, but at us sailing the boat, but it knocked it up. It was just looking at the sails, but it was actually kind of interesting as I was watching it to look at the sails, just, straight up the mast and look at how the sails were trimmed. So that was an interesting one, but maybe we'll share that one in the future at some point. So. All right. All right, other thoughts, comments here from the gang. I appreciate you guys joining in and sharing your thoughts, your questions. What do you guys like to do with your boats? And this is mostly about Hobie 16s. Other boats, of course, are going to be a little bit different. Hobie 14 maybe is the most similar in terms of setup. There's, of course, it's a 14, it's not a 16, but, there's sort of the big themes here are going to be the same. If you get into, you start talking about like a Wildcat, that's kind of a different world. There's a lot, there in those boats in terms of, user preferences and, customization that they all like to do. So, but that's a whole nother subject, which is really, I'm not F-18 or a Wildcat sailor, so that's a little bit beyond my area of expertise, but it's certainly out there. So. All right. Well, any last questions here? Maybe we'll just oh, my phone is ringing. Sorry about that. So maybe we'll wrap up here. Call it an evening here. If you like to, you're certainly welcome. If you're not watching this live, you can, comment on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll try to respond to those comments if you're not watching it live. All right, a couple last questions here. Do you carry extra equipment on your boat? Yeah, from Herb. So good question. So we use one of those zipper tramp bags, that Hobie makes, and we snap that right on the trampoline, right up in the front behind the mast. And that is a perfect place to carry your water bottle. I put a water bottle in there. Always have a water bottle in there. Sometimes more than one, depending on how hot it is. And then we typically will carry a little tiny tube of sunscreen in there, just for on the water reapplications, and then extra parts. What equipment do you carry? So we do carry a few little extra parts in there. So I've got an assortment of little shackles and pins, just a few of different sizes in there. And I'll have a little bit of bungee, and I'll have some a short piece of Dyneema line in there. So those are kind of the extra parts I carry, and I find that kind of gets you through most situations that are fixable on the water. Of course, there's other things that, if it breaks, you're just not going to fix it on the water. For example, if you break your tiller, you're just, you're not, the 49er guys actually carry an extra tiller strapped to their mast. If you watch those sailors, but if you break your tiller on a Hobie, yeah, you're sort of in a bad situation, and you're pretty much done. But I'll carry a few just little parts in there, and those have salvaged me in the past when something came apart or I lost something. Yeah, no, I don't carry duct tape, Herb, but I guess some folks do that. I'll have to sail by you next time I need duct tape and borrow some. But yeah, I mostly just have an assortment of little parts there. So yeah, and Chris commented here. It talks about, Nellie's been crewing a lot about sail shape, and yeah, the sail shape is a whole new world, and it is something to pay attention to. And I think there's a lot of stuff to be gained from the sail shape, and looking at that and really refining how we're sailing the boats and how we're trimming the sails and tuning the sails. So it's something I'm paying a lot of attention to these days, and yeah, I agree. It's something to look at. And we've been doing some video analysis of that and trying to look at that afterwards in different wind conditions and trying to make sense of it. So, but, sailing other boats, it's definitely, you see in other sailboats how they do it. And a lot of boats have a lot more adjustability and pay a lot more attention to that. So I think it's important, and something that there's a gain for us in terms of sailing the boats and making them go well, to be able to really refine our sail shape and our tuning. All right. All right. Well, thanks for joining in. It's, I guess, about 45 minutes. That's a good session here. So we'll wrap up here now. And like I said, if you didn't watch this live, feel free to add your comments on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll try and respond to those. Reach out and contact us through our channels online, and we will hopefully see you all soon. So this was again another episode sponsored by the International Hobie Class Association. And for those of your members, we thank you for support. But if you're not a member, we very much would love to have you become a member of the class, become a part of the Sail at Large or Hobie sailing community. And you can find a lot more about us at hobieclass.com. So thank you, and we'll talk to you again soon. Oh, and just one final comment. So our next webinar is going to be next Monday. So Steve Fields will be with me, and we'll be talking about our upcoming World Championships. So tune in for that. All right. Till then.